I'd like to thank Yeshiva for allowing me this opportunity to share some Divrei Torah with you. We have in this week's Parashat two different mitzvahs of Tzedaka at the end. One, mitzvahs aseh, and one, mitzvahs los aseh. The aseh, ki fasach tiftach es yad chalo. The los aseh, los ha'ametis levavcha. In light of the fact that there's an aseh and a los aseh, this yields a fascinating question in the Gemara in Bava Metzia and elsewhere, which discusses the idea of pruta de Rav Yosef, that there's an instance where individuals engage in the mitzvah of a Shabbos Aveda, hence they're exempt from the mitzvah of tzedakah. When Ani comes to their door, they wouldn't have to give him any tzedakah. The question is raised, well, we know there's an idea of osek mitzvah pater min a mitzvah. It exempts you from an aseh, but it doesn't exempt you from a los aseh. If a person is going for pidyon shvuim, they might not have to sleep in the sukkah if they can, but they can't eat treifus along the way. They can't violate a lav when they're doing an aseh. So why over here should it exempt you from the lav of tzedakah? Rabbi Chanan Wasserman in the Kovitz Shirim and Rameir Simcha in the Or Sameach suggest an answer based on our Ramban and Kiddushin that there's certain lavin that are really just meant to enforce the aseh. They're meant to strengthen the aseh. Here too, they claim, there's not really an independent lav of lo sa'ametz is lavavcha. If you violate the aseh, you'll also violate this lav. It's meant to be mechazik the aseh. So to the extent that you're pater from the aseh, it's an osik mitzvah, pater min a mitzvah, the lav you'll also be exempt from. You have to dan the aseh. If you're exempt from the aseh, then the lav doesn't apply. The Stipler suggests a different answer. The Stipler suggests that the name of the Iser is lo sa'ametis lavavcha. The name of the Iser is imis alev, callousness. If you're engaged in a positive act of doing a mitzvah, a Shabbos Aveda, it's not callous not to give tzedakah. You're doing something important right now. That's not a callous act. If we combine these two answers, Rabbi Chanan's assertion that the aseh and the los aseh are intimately connected, and the Stipler's assertion that the los aseh is a function of imis alev, callousness, we could come to a definition of tzedakah, that tzedakah is fundamentally not being callous towards your friend. That can explain a number of different halachas in Hilchos Tzedaka, but just to bring one out with a beautiful vort from the Ben Ish Chai, the great Iranian scholar, on this pasuk. He writes over here, what does it mean, be'echad sharecha be'artzecha? You have to give to an ani in your arts. What do you mean? Yeah, even in chutz la'aretz, there's a mitzvah of giving tzedakah. So Ben Ish Chai explains it with a mashal. He says, there's a poor person, he got very dirty from the rain, he was very muddy, he comes into a wealthy person's house, beautiful floors, marble floors, and he comes in, he trudges in all the dirt, and it gets the marble floors dirty, and the usher says, get out of my house, you're ruining the floors. The ani says, we say every day in Baruch Sha'amar, Baruch Merachim al Aretz, Baruch Merachim al Abrios. I see that you're very makbid on Merachim al Aretz. You're not so makbid on Merachim al Abrios. But the Torah here is being meramis to us that an individual has to care at least just as much about their anis, their anim, as about their arts. And that's true in halacha, that fundamentally a person's chiyuv tzedakah is really relative to their financial wealth, which makes sense according to this idea that it's a question of callousness. A person who is just making ends meet generally should not be giving tzedakah. It could actually be callous for them to give tzedakah. They have to push their family not to get the basic needs and things they need in order to give tzedakah. That's also callous. On the other hand, you can have a person who's giving $50,000 a year, but he's making $1 million a year. That's also an act of callousness. Relative to his resources and his needs, that's a callous act. It's all relative to the person, what is an imetz halev. Similarly, Rosh Yeshiva Lichtenstein Zatzal has a beautiful article on tzedakah to the non-working poor, where he balances the different values that are at play there and the complexity of the issues. His basic setup is that tzedakah might not apply, but chesed still does apply. That's kind of how he sets it up. Within our analysis, you could just look at it as more of a spectrum, a question of at what point is it an imetz alev, relative to a person's personal resources and the demands of others, other types of anim, other types of mitzvah demands. At what point is that classified as an imetz halev? But the question I'd like to raise now is this really ever an imetz halev? A person wants to go on a cruise for 6 months. So a person comes to their house, they said, listen, I can't feed my family. Could you spare some money? I'm sorry. I set it all aside for this cruise. I can't help you now. Is that really an imetz halev? I mean, at the end of the day, the halacha says, the Rabban writes, by v'ahavta recha kamocha, you can't really ever love your friend as much as you love yourself. So why is that an imetz halev? So maybe you could explain it with a mashal that Person lo aleinu, their father or their brother come to them. They just lost their house, their job, their car, their clothing. They come. They don't have any food. They say, "Please help me out. I'm starving." Dad, brother, I'm sorry. I just set aside money for this big vacation. The half a year we're going on a cruise. I can't afford to help you out. I'm really sorry. I think we'd say that's an imat aleif. That is an act of callousness relative to what the person was trying to engage in and the needs of their close biological relatives. That's an act of imat aleif. So what the halacha here is saying, if you read the psukim closely, they repeat over one word again and again. Achecha, achecha. The halacha is demanding that we treat each other as an achecha, and then it becomes callous. Meaning, it's not a naturally callous act not to give to somebody relative to your own needs and desires and wants, even if they're luxuries. But what the halacha says is that if that person was achecha, would you still have the same perspective? Would it still be the same analysis? In the Sefer Meged Givas Olam, he brings down about Reb Chaim Soloveitchik, who was known as a tremendous Tzedaka. People slept in his bed, they slept in his house on the floor. At some point, the city of Brisk stopped giving him the check because he gave it all to the Anim. They had to give it directly to his wife. But Reb Chaim said about himself that the first time he ever had to give a significant amount of tzedaka, he couldn't sleep the whole night. It was so hard for him. And the Brisker Rav of Veldwald said about Reb Chaim also. He said his father wasn't a particularly generous, kind-hearted person by nature. He was machmir in all areas of halacha, so too when it came to tzedaka and chesed as well. According to the way we're saying it, the idea is that he really internalized this idea achecha. He made the achecha outlook, the achecha psychology, really a part of himself. Echad Ha'am, the famous Jewish writer, said that more than the Jewish people have kept Shabbos, Shabbos has kept the Jewish people. I think in past generations, maybe past 2 generations, we've seen that's not really the case. There are Jews who don't keep Shabbos, have no shaychus to Shabbos, and they still have a shaychus to the Jewish people. Well, where does that come from? Really, the more correct thing, more than what Echad Ha'am said, is that tzedaka has kept the Jewish people. Throughout the generations, in all communities, in all flavors, the achecha outlook has been a major player. What keeps many Jews still connected to Judaism is the federation of their particular community. They don't observe Shabbos, anything, but they're connected to the federation. They give to Jewish causes. They promote Jewish causes. Tzedaka is what has kept people connected to a large extent, more than Shabbos, etc., etc. Because this has gone so deep into the genes, so deep into the DNA, the achecha outlook, that it's carried through even the generations of people that become farther and farther from Yiddishkeit. Certainly we're in difficult times. It's a time where we all really need a lot of bracha. It says at the end of this week's Parsha, by the Tzedaka, Nason titen lo v'lo yira levavcha b'sitcha lo, ki b'gla hadavar hazeh yivarecha Hashem elokecha. The Torah promises a bracha for tzedakah. Many instances the Torah does not promise brachas for different types of mitzvahs, but here it does. So certainly behooves us to consider that. Wish everybody a good Shabbos.